Right, so super excited today in a moment to introduce Will Brown. Will has very recently successfully exited his business for multi-seven figures cash. And there's a lot of fun stuff to do in here. But first of all, Will, it probably antagonizes a lot of people that you've scaled a business, done like 8 figures in revenue, extremely profitable, multi-seven figure cash exit, and yet age 32, which is depressing. If I wanted to get competitive, I'd say I did my first exit at age 29, but it wasn't. I will say it wasn't for it was a 7-figure deal, but it wasn't as big as yours. So so congratulations. But there's loads of stuff I want to talk about, Will. But let's jump straight into the middle. And the fascinating thing for me about this deal, and thank you for taking the time to share with our listeners, is tell me, how did having your best month ever almost cost you several millions of pounds?
Oh, yeah, it's well, let me map it out. So we started trying to sell the business back in February. Okay, so I began working with yourself as a mentor. I began working with my M&A advisor, Dominic. We got an offer in February that fell through the end of March. Then we got another offer from the private equity firm that actually ended up buying us start of April. They loved the business. It was, they said multiple times through the process, this is exactly what we were looking for. This is exactly what we were looking for. And I was, I was excited, really, really excited to sell to them. And yeah, we signed the LOI in April, and I just thought, right, let's go hard. Let's show them that we can still grow, because I've read a lot of stories and heard a lot of stories about people that when they sign an LOI, they kind of start to relax a little bit, let the business drift because they're close to selling it. So they're not in growth mode anymore, right? And I thought, let me keep going, pedal to the metal, and grow the business across the year as they're going through due diligence, and prove to them how much I care and how much I respect them buying us. So we started spending a little bit more money on ads in April, a little bit more money in May. We'd just taken on a new sales rep who was getting ramped up, who was doing really, really well. He actually had his best month ever in May. And in May, we also ran this big offer that we do usually once a year. And all the stars aligned in May. We had like by far the best month ever. I think we did US dollars, we did $824,000 for May. So massive month, almost at the $1 million a month mark.
What's a typical month? So compare that 800 to like, what would a normal month be, Will?
We were at about 550, 600-ish, more or less by that stage. So we jumped a lot in May. We were all super excited. Our new rep had the best month ever. He actually set the record for the most money ever earned by a rep that month as well. And it was just the best month. And then at the end of May, 2 of our best reps quit to go and start their own offer. I think when they saw how well the business was doing, I think they got inspired and wanted to kind of do their own thing in a bit of a different niche, but they wanted to build their own info business. And then a week later, another rep quit because he told us he'd saved up all his commission and he wanted to go traveling, right? So great. So we lost 3 reps. We went from 8 reps down to 4, I believe it was. And that obviously took revenue down a lot in June. Also, we weren't running any offers in June, so it was kind of back to business as usual. So we jumped from, wherever we were, about 550 right up to almost 850, and then right back down to like 450 area after losing those reps. Now, the PE firm, because they were basically buying us based on May to May, right? So they were just taking that financial snapshot, that 12-month snapshot. Luckily, they actually included the May that we had as well, which actually bumped up the sale price by quite a lot because that added to the EBITDA. So they were looking at that snapshot, and then fast forward to about literally 2 weeks before we were meant to close. And it got to the stage where we were starting to say, oh, we're going to close in a few days. We're going to close in a few days. We're almost there now. we're talking days before we signed the APA and closed. One of the two partners of the fund said, "Oh, can we just look at the June, July, August P&Ls just to kind of see how it's been?" They'd never asked to see them for all these months. You know, they just kind of took a glimpse at them, and they saw what happened in May and June. You know, coming back, and they were thrown off, to say the least. They were like, "What the hell happened? What's going on? Is the business okay? How can that happen?" And obviously they didn't have any context, you know, so they didn't know about the reps, they didn't know about the offer that we ran, and so on and so forth. So when we explained it all, it was okay. But when they first saw it, they went fairly mental. I can't explain it better than that. We had this call with them a few days later, and it was like a very difficult call. They were basically, me and my M&A advisor, Dominic, we actually went into that call thinking they're going to pull the deal. They're not going to close now. You know, Dominic had spoke to one of the partners, Carl. Apparently, Carl had a really harsh call with him, you know, about, "Oh, we don't know whether we can move forward. We might have to adjust the price, blah, blah, blah." Did the difficult call, all went away to think about it. Didn't hear anything for a couple of days. And then Carl came back and he was like, "You know what? We understand the explanation. You've grown back up in July and August and started bringing that right back up again. So the trend is clearly up. The business is clearly fine. We're going to go ahead." But
I love this, Will, because I want to start with this story for the listeners, because on the one hand, at the surface, you go, "Great. You know what? You said to me at the start of the year, I want to sell the business 6 months." And I said, "Oh, it's tight timeline. But it looked like we might hit it." And then obviously it ended up taking a few months longer than that. And it kind of dragged out a bit longer, which is not uncommon. For those that have never sold before, it's very common that the last bit drags and drags and drags. But normally it's the opposite of your story. So normally, you even said at the start, people take the foot off the gas because due diligence, you know, if somebody's writing you a 7-figure check, like the due diligence they want to go through can be quite galling. And then consequently, the owner takes the foot off the gas pedal of the business, and the business starts to underperform. Whereas yours, as you've already said, the long-term average, it was only just trending upwards. But because of this little spike in that very narrow time frame, 3-month period, it looked like there was a big spike up and then it's trending downwards, right? And so, of course, they naturally panicked and thought, "Oh, there might be something amiss," which weirdly, so that spike, whilst it didn't cost you the money, it did delay the sale because they wanted to be confident and certain that actually it was just a positive and not the sign of impending doom. So, well, let me rewind though, because we've jumped in the middle. Let's set the scene though first. So, what did the business? What was the business? What did the business do? And then I want to hook back into separately. My follow-up question will be about the name of the business, because you've achieved what a lot of people would define as being impossible. So I want to dispel some fear or myths about what business is sellable. But tell us what the business did, or certainly still does, just under a new owner.
Yeah, for sure. So we are an e-learning company, and we basically sell online education. So online courses. We have an online mastermind event. We have a software on the back end as well. But essentially, we share knowledge online in an information kind of way. Yeah.
Great. And what give us a feel for size of company, employee headcount, revenues. What kind of size were you at the point that you exited?
Yeah, so we were a team of 60. Well, going into it, we were a team of 60 before losing the reps. So yeah, large sales team of 8, sales team manager, a coaching team, support team, bookkeeper, accountant, so on and so forth. So yeah.
Perfect. And being an information business, being an educational business, again, you may not be able to say, but could you give us those types of businesses are typically very high margin? What was the revenue range? If you can't be specific, can you give us a ballpark? I mean, you said about the month and the average month, so it kind of lends itself to people multiplying the two together. But what were your revenues?
Yeah, for sure. So to touch on net margin, I mean, we never went below 32% net margin. We were more like lower than some, you know, but for some information product businesses, but we were about 45% net margin on average. Revenue wise, at that stage, we were doing about 400 to 600K per month.
Yeah.
So before the whole May debacle and losing the reps, we were tracking for, a good few million this year.
Yeah, fantastic. So amazing. So that kind of sets the context. Obviously, you started this business from scratch, and you scaled it up. At what point did you decide that you wanted to sell? Because a lot of people would say, typically a lot of educational businesses, especially if the founder was the educator, they end up in a position where they kind of go, well, they've got a job. Now, it might be a well-paying job, but it is a job. So therefore, they believe it's not exitable. So actually, the first point I'll make is, what do you have to say about that? Because a lot of people say, well, you developed this product, you were teaching people stuff that was information that came out of your head. Yeah. How the hell can you sell the business when it's dependent upon you?
Yes, it's a common one. I mean, I've actually heard people say very matter-of-factly, you cannot sell an online course business. You cannot sell an information product business, let alone to a PE firm, So felt good to make it happen and be able to kind of tell this story. But yeah, it absolutely can be done. It's just got to, I mean, this is one thing that you say a lot, Dan, build a business that's not reliant on you. Okay. And that's fantastic advice. I mean, that's how you exit a business. You can't, it can't be sold if it kind of rests on your shoulders. But on the other side of that, to come back to your question about why did I want to sell, in a weird way, removing myself made me want to sell, which is probably a strange kind of paradox. You're meant to remove yourself and then make money and be happy. But by removing myself, I'm hesitant to say the word like depression, right? Because I certainly wasn't depressed. I live in Dubai and I was making good money and stuff. But there was an element of like, what do I do today? I don't have meetings. I don't have calls. There's nothing really to do. And in the end, I started filling my time with business coaching, so I kind of just started building something else because I'd removed myself. So instead of removing myself and going and enjoying life and sitting on a beach, I ended up accidentally starting another business, so.
Right. So it's fascinating. So you built an information business, but rather than keep teaching it yourself, you replace yourself. You got coaches. You created online content, membership stuff that's like videos. So there's a portal, etc., which lessen the business is dependent upon you. You got the team in place, and therefore it didn't need you. But still, I'm going to push a little bit harder, Will. So you had some other interest, but why sell? Because you can. With the margins that you're talking about, you've got a very profitable business, so you do have from what you just said, I think people can assume you've got a 7-figure net right number, and you're going to go, okay, so great, why not just put up your feet and be done? Why what was the desire that caused you to go, okay, I want something else?
Yeah, I just had a coffee with a friend a few hours ago. We were going deep on this because he was asking the same question. So the thing that made me want to sell was, I know this sounds cheesy, but all of the financial goals that I'd ever set for myself, even if they were on the kind of smaller side, but I'd hit them all. Like when I started the business to, I know it sounds, again, cheesy, but I started the business to get rich. I started the business to make loads of money, buy loads of real estate, have 7 figures in cash. And every financial goal that I'd set, I'd hit. And, it makes me think about that saying, don't set goals too small because you might just hit them. And yes. then what are you going to do? And I definitely did. I set them too low, I think, looking back. But I hit them and I just lost all inspiration, because I remember I was sat downstairs one day having a coffee in the cafe, writing in my journal. And I think I wrote something like, what am I going to do now? What do I want to do now? Because I'm sat here making a lot of money without really doing a lot of work, which is what people think is the dream, but I'm bored. I'm taking 2 or 3 hours to have a coffee and write in my journal and kind of look out the window thinking, what do I do? What's next? You know, in those moments, for me at least, I kind of realized there is more to life than just money. You know, money's the foundation for sure. It gives you the freedom, gives you the choice. It puts you in a 5-star hotel in Dubai overlooking the ocean, right? But yeah, it's not the be all and end all.
So, I mean, I want to translate this into advice. What do you wish that you'd known, etc. For people listening as they reflect on selling? Because a lot of people listening to this will have businesses that aren't that profitable or are heavily dependent upon them. But that just a tease. So we're going to go there. But first, where we are on the timeline right now is you've got a very profitable business and you decided you wanted to sell. How did you find the buyer, right? I mean, you keep saying PE firm, and you've used a few different phrases which people that are not familiar with M&A might be unsure of. So by PE firm, you mean a private equity firm. That was the eventual buyer. But taking us back a step before that, when you decided that you were going to sell, where did you go and look? How did you line up? Because they weren't the only people interested in the business. How did you line up buyers?
Yeah, for sure. I think I skipped your question about like what made me want to sell. So let me just kind of get that answered for you first. Now, when it kind of occurred to me, like, right, I've achieved all my financial goals. What do I want to do now? What's next? I remember asking myself this question, like, if I had all the money in the world, what would I fill my time with? What would I do if there was no money? If money didn't exist, what would I do for fun? And I just thought, I love talking about business. I love talking about investment. I love building companies. That's like my absolute passion. And I'd do that for free. So I thought, well, that doesn't align with the e-learning company. You know, I don't work in it anymore. I don't enjoy it. I'm not passionate about growing it further. And if anything, the liquidity event that would occur by exiting would give me even more money to play with, to allow me to kind of go in this new direction of, you know, providing business coaching and kind of going down that route. I want to start a little private equity firm of my own next year and kind of take equity in companies and help them grow and so on and so forth. So that's why I wanted to sell, because I just lost the passion for it, didn't want to grow it further, didn't need to grow it further either. And I just thought if I can sell it, that would just be the cherry on top. You know, and that would just really bookmark this chapter of my life and I can kind of go into the next one. So that's why I sold. To touch on what you just asked, so how did I sell it? Well, yeah, this is the thing that people say can't be done, right? So this is a great thing to be able to talk about. But when I wanted to sell, the person that even helped me understand that I could sell was yourself, right? So the first natural step was to come to you and say, Dan, please help me. You know, how do I do it? Where do I start? So I hired you to coach me through the process, which was, I'm so bloody happy that I did, man. I couldn't have done it without you. No way, man. Absolutely no way. So I hired yourself. I also hired an M&A advisor called Dominic Sullivan, and he's been helping with acquisitions for many, many, many years. So he had a book of potential buyers that we took the business out to. And as I say, a venture capital firm approached us first, then it fell through after a few weeks. They decided that they wanted to go in a different direction. Then I got introduced to Carl and Joshua, the founders of Highview, the private equity firm that actually ended up buying us. And we got on really well. They loved the business. They loved the business model. And yeah, they said, look, this is exactly what we've been looking for. So let's go. So
yeah, I think it's interesting because I think this is why it's great to have you. I'm so glad you're happy to share about this, Will, for people listening, because I think when you've not done it before, it feels scary and people actually make it more complicated than it needs to be. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And I think that, thank you for your kind words, but I think whether or not it was me or Dominic or some other people, there's an example, something that's got the very specific technical skills and a book of potential buyers, but you've also got a mentor, i.e. somebody that's done it before you. Right. And it's especially helpful if they've done it multiple times. Right? That's why you don't want to go in blind. You don't want to, I don't think anybody wants to be the first person, the first patient that a surgeon operates on. You know what I mean? You don't want to be the practice patient. You're like, okay, you want somebody that's been there and done it. So having mentors that have gone, right, I've bought and sold multiple companies before, is helpful to give you an outside perspective, and obviously the appropriate legal accounting advice. And so with you, I mean, I want to say to the people listening, yes, private equity VCs can be a way to go, but your business needs to fit the right profile to be appropriate for them in a lot of cases. And I know another one we discussed with you, which again, we won't be specific and name names, but we definitely considered a trade sale, i.e. other people that were in the same industry, and there was quite a few conversations, and there was one where it was with a big competitor who it was, I don't want to say very advanced, but it was certainly like really discussed very transparently about the. So I think a buyer, I think when you've never sold a company before, for the people listening to this, well, they sometimes go, oh my God, who's got a checkbook that's gonna part with, you know, the money that this company will be worth that I'm willing to part for? And the answer is there's a ton of people, a megaton. Yeah. The problem is not that the buyers aren't out there. The problem is that you don't know anybody that knows the buyers. And that's where a mentor, M&A advisor, etc., can be tremendously helpful. So what would you say, Will, is, because I know we're limited on the time that we've got together today, what would you say is the best advice that you got in either preparing your company for sale or the actual sale itself? What was the best piece of advice that you got that you'd share for anybody thinking about selling their company?
What's the best advice specifically for people that are thinking of selling, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the advice that worked for me and gave me a lot of clarity and a lot of peace of mind was to have goals that I wanted to achieve through owning the business and understand when you want to sell. Okay, so that for me, because I knew I wanted to sell. You know, a couple of years earlier, when I was in your mastermind, you know, I learned that I could sell, and I made it a goal. You know, I remember saying to myself, right, I'm going to buy, I'm just going to be honest, I'm just going to share the numbers. So I wanted to buy £2.5 million of property in England outright with cash. I wanted to save up at least £1 million in cash after tax. And then when I'd done those two things, I wanted to sell a business. So I achieved I actually achieved them last year. And then it started to play on my mind. I was like, right, I've done what I wanted to do now. That's what I wanted from this business. The next goal in line is to sell it. And I pushed the can down the road a little bit. And I was like, no, not yet. No, not yet. A little bit more. Let's grow a little bit further. Let's build a little bit further. And then towards the end of last year, I think it was December, I was sat downstairs in the cafe, writing in my journal, thinking, what's next? Thinking, what would I do if money was not a problem? I'd also just bought my dream apartment in Dubai with cash as well, which was nice. To remove, you know, no mortgage to pay, no rent to pay. I kind of own it and love it there. And I just thought, there's no need to have this business anymore. I don't enjoy it anymore. I'm not inspired to grow it further. Now's the time. Let's sell. So my advice, if this helps anybody, is understand what you want from the business. You know, do you love it and you want to run it forever? Great. That's your thing. Do it. You know, stand by it. Do you have financial goals? You know, do you want to buy X of real estate? Do you want to save up Y of cash? Do you want to, whatever you want to do, I like to be very clear on it so that you know when is the time to sell. Because if you're not clear on where you're going and what you're doing, it's like, you know, you're in a car driving with no destination. You don't know where you're going. So when do you know to stop? When do you know to start? Where do you know where to go? You know, you're lost. So
it's fascinating. I mean, I remember us having a lot of conversations about this. Well, and I don't want to say, oh, when you know, you know. I'm not necessarily sure that's true, but I do know that it's a very personal and emotional decision, right? I think, you know, we're not talking about being a FTSE 100 company exiting. That's much more mathematical and accountants. But for individual owners that have scaled up a business, it is personal. Because again, your business was very reliable and predictable, and there was definitely an argument for keeping that. I remember us debating that, and me even saying, and we'll come on to the deal structure and things in a moment, me basically saying, well, you could get more money, like you almost should be crazy, you're doing yourself a financial disservice. And you responded by saying, yeah, but this hits my goals. And actually, if the purpose of money is to basically create a life that makes you happy, you're like, right, I've got this, and I remember when you bought the apartment in Dubai, etc., that you wanted, and all those specific goals. So I don't think, I know you're not implying this, but for those listening, it's not like, oh yeah, once you buy your dream home in cash or whatever, that like that's it. But what is great, and what I think you are saying is you were clear about what your goals were, and so you were keen not to become another one of those entrepreneurs that's always trying to scale, and then because it'll be worth more later, and then the whole thing ends up imploding. I mean, sadly, I spoke to a business owner yesterday who achieved all his financial dreams in terms of the financial target, and he was close to selling his business, and a couple of unfortunate mishaps back to back, and basically he's lost the business. He lost it all. So this was a business which was worth many millions of pounds, and in theory he just had to exit because he'd had it so leveraged. He'd not really built any personal wealth for himself, and as you've revealed, you were building it along the way and taking money out as he went, and then a couple of unfortunate things happened and he lost it all. And it's like, oh my God. And now he is deeply in debt when 6 months, a year ago, he was like, set, let's get the exit and we're done. And so I'm one, Will, for long-term buy and hold generally, even though I have done exits. But I think if you're listening to this right now, I almost want it to be a tough decision. I think it's worthy of reflecting, taking the money off the table, entrepreneurs relief. I think it's worth exploring what's out there, and that is what was good, which transitions me nicely to, actually, I want to talk about deal structure, but I want to ask one other question first. What was the worst piece of advice that you've heard? So now, as somebody that's successfully exited a business, multi-7-figure cash deal, so that's most people's dream scenario, Will. So for someone that's been there and done it, what would you say is the single worst bit of advice either you were given or you see being given about exiting your company, where on the other side you're going to go, well, that was just blatantly not true?
Yeah, for sure. Well, honestly, I think the worst advice, as simple as it sounds, was the people saying, don't sell, And in fact, I mean, the guy who you've maybe just mentioned maybe he should have sold earlier, but I don't want like all the money in the world and all the wealth in the world. I just wanted what would make me happy and to kind of, move on to the next thing. So I think there were a lot of people that said all through the journey, a lot of friends, one person from in the business as well, who was saying, don't sell, we can scale further. We can make this bigger, we can like take over the world and you'll sell it for way more later, but again, falling back on my premeditated goals, what I wanted in a calm head, outside of the sale, because there's a lot of emotion in a sale. I mean, God, so much up and down and stress and this and that. Like I said earlier, can happen through the sale process.
Well, I was going to say it's multifaceted, right? As in, it's never just the numbers, and that's why you did it well. Because again, I'm not going to throw myself under the bus. I remember at one point, and we're going to come on to deal structure. I know, contractually we can't talk about all the specifics, but we can talk about some of the concepts at least. And one of the wrinkles in the deal structure tipped me from being like, you know what, Will, I remember saying to you, I would not sell. I personally would not do this deal. And I give credit to you because it is a personal choice. And I remember that you did reflect on it, deeply. So whilst, again, if it's right for you to sell, you were right to ignore the people that were saying don't sell. But at the same time, I think the wise person gets input, gets external input, non-emotional input. And the fact that you non-emotionally evaluate it and then went, you know what, I'm still deciding to proceed. And I remember me sending you that voice note going, no. For me, this is like, it's just tipped from being, yeah, okay, it's good. They're getting a good deal. You could have got more, but I understand. Sell to me. Yeah, you know what? I'd say no, back out of this now. And you reflect and came back and went, you know what, Dan, I really thought about it. And actually, no, it still works for me. So I'm out. Excuse me, no, I'm out. I'm going to go ahead. So is a very personal, emotional thing. So transitioning into the deal then, Will, to the degree that you're able to, I think sometimes people go, oh yeah, it's all cash and it's all cash now. And then at the other end, you've got a whole load of people out there that do courses on how to buy businesses for £1, no money down and payment over the next 76 years, deferred and contingent. But in reality, most small business sales are a combination. So what are the component parts of your deal structure? So I suppose, firstly, how is a business valued, right? Could you give us a range, whether monetary or a multiple range that you're able to share? And then secondly, what were the component bits of the deal for how you got to that price, i.e. what was in cash, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. So we sold based on May to May 2.6x EBITDA. So that's
right. So 2.5 times EBITDA, for those that don't know, earnings for interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. Basically, simplistically, for a business such as yours, where there's really no depreciation or really amortization, it's basically profit before tax, right? Because you have no debt either.
Yeah, it's basically just 2.6x the net profit from May to May. So May 2022 to May 2023. And obviously that massive May that we had just increased the value by a little bit more. So that was the multiple that we sold for. In terms of the deal structure, they gave me a fairly significant chunk of cash up front, and then the remaining portion across 2 years. So split into months, and they also gave me 10% per year on top of those chunks.
Good. So just to elaborate on that. So first of all, the recap would be, I'm going to come back to the 2.6 and say something about that, an important point that I want everybody to hear. But okay, so you got a big chunk up front, and then a portion of it was basically paid over time, over a 2-year period. But what was the 10%?
Yeah, so just to kind of break down the maths, let's imagine that it was $1 million across 2 years, right? So $500,000 1 year, $500,000 the next, and they just put 10% on that. So instead of $500,000, it would be $550,000.
Oh, thank you. Actually, great. It's funny because even though I was in on the deal, Will, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, and now, sorry, I missed you. So basically, they were paying you interest. So you're the lender, right? So they're metaphorically, they're buying your house and they paid a large cash deposit, but they did have a mortgage, but the mortgage is with you, the seller. So you were doing vendor finance that they're paying you out over time, but in return for you letting them pay that small part, in the made up example, $1 million over 2 years, you're charging them an interest rate of 10%.
Correct.
Yeah, perfect, great. I've got it. And what somebody with, so actually let me move back on the 2.6 and then let's move on the deferred. On the 2.6, some people that are listening to this don't know what multiple means, and really it's a proxy. The multiple of profit that you'll sell for will vary massively by industry, but it's really a proxy for how reliable, predictable, and sustainable those earnings are. And so things like big companies typically have a larger multiple because they're more stable than small companies. Companies with much higher recurring revenue will sell for a bigger multiple. So like retail, even big retail might only sell for a couple of times profit, but mobile phone contract companies, large companies might sell for 20, 30 or more times profit. And there's outliers as well. So it's not always that simple. But some people are going to go, oh, that's too low, Will. But the point I want to emphasize is for small businesses in the UK, not last year, the last data I saw was for the year before, sold, ironically, for 2.96 times profit on average. That's small cap businesses. And while you're slightly below that, Will, and I remember saying, Will, I think you can get a bit more. I want to give credit to you. Sorry, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so before I came into the sale process, I didn't have a massive amount of experience with multiples. Obviously, now I fully understand that the multiple is kind of a reflection of the long term, of the value, of the quality of the business, right? But I remember writing in my journal that I wanted 1x. I wrote in there, if I can just get a year of net given to me, I kind of saw that as I'm basically buying a year of time, because I can own the business and have the money in a year, but blah, blah, blah. or I can just get it all now and go and kind of build something new. But yeah, I'm glad that the buyer didn't find out about this during the process. But I wanted 1x. Dominic, when I started working with Dominic, he actually said 2.4. He suggested 2.4 based on his analysis. And the PE firm actually offered us 2.6. They over offered.
Well, I mean, here's the credit. I mean, again, it's like a house. Houses typically have too many comparables, so it sits in a quite tight range. But it's like whatever the person's willing to sell for, right? It's a buyer and seller big price, right? If somebody really wants a house, they'll overbid. If somebody really needs to sell the house, they'll sell it for a lower price. So again, it's personal, but it's also the inverse of an interest rate, right? So simplistically, a 3 times multiple is the equivalent of a 33% return on your money, right? So if a business is making 333,000 in profit a year and it sells for $1 million, that's a 3x multiple. But that's a bit like, well, if you bought the thing for $1 million and it gives you a 33% return, right? It's the inverse. So a 4x multiple is a 25% return on your money. But so people don't get lost in the specific multiple. Where I give you credit, Will, is some people go, oh, the business is worth more. Yeah, okay. But maybe, but you've got to find something that's willing to sell it for. So the story that I'm not going to mention names, that I mentioned to the person that I lost it, who is a friend, an associate of mine, so not a client, but somebody that I've known in business for a long time. I remember him getting an offer from an investor because he asked me for advice on it 5 years ago, and I thought he should take it, and he said no, it's not enough. And so where I give you credit is, even though some people look at it and go, no, you can get that more. And I remember like somebody looking at your business that was potentially a buyer and ironically not being trusting as to why you were selling it so cheap, and pretty much said as much. And so you could go, oh, you could have got more, but well, yeah, but they didn't have their checkbook out. And so to give you credit, you got the deal done. And so it's no good saying that your house is worth £1 million if nobody's willing to offer you more than 800 for it. If you need to sell, you're just stroking your own ego by saying, "Oh, my house is worth, my metaphorical house is worth £1 million." So I've got to give you significant credit, Will, for not being greedy. So to loop back, you decided you want to sell your business. Yes, you did all the sensible things that we're not talking about on this call, as in you gradually removed yourself, you hired people, etc. You were still kind of overseeing things. You then went and got some advisors. So the M&A advisor is effectively the equivalent of a estate agent, as in they knew buyers and they could advise you in the process of selling your business, right? You also had a mentor and guide you through some of the specifics of the deal and understanding the language. So that got your business presented in front of potential buyers. You then got an offer, and then the offer was, it was based on the valuation of the business, but while they gave you a very decent big chunk of cash up front, there was a proportion of it that was deferred. How did you know, Will, or how do you know, since we're relatively soon after the exit, how do you know that you're going to get paid? Because some people go, oh, well, they're buying your business. What if they don't pay you? How are you protected?
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is I don't know. Whether I will get paid. I can't. I wish I could see the future, but I can't. There is a clause in the contract whereby if they miss so many payments, I get the business back. So that gives me a lot of peace of mind. But the business is great. The product is fantastic. The team are absolutely awesome. The PE firm are incredibly talented as well, and they kind of come from that financial world. I won't say more than that, but they come from the financial world. So you can't tell the future, but I'd be very surprised if anything happened there. And I think they're going to do great. I really think they're going to do fantastic with that business.
So you do yourself a bit of a disservice. And again, I'm jumping in here because I'm guessing what some of the listeners are thinking. So like a lot of lawyers say, "Oh, don't do that. You're not going to get paid." And I kind of go, again, it's in my mind, it comes back to your goals, because you can put stuff in the contract which de-risks it a little bit. But I remember that you remember that the cash, the lump sum of cash got you to your figure that you were happy anyway. So to a certain degree, you kind of went, well, it's all gravy. And I will say, I did a big exit, Will, where a large amount of it was paid out over time. And actually, I got paid on an earn-out basis. So the reason why I'm saying this for listeners is because people say, "Oh, earn-out," which basically means it's dictated by how the business performs, how much of that money you get. They're like, "Oh, you never get any of it. Don't count it." Actually, I ended up getting way more. So going back to your analogy, you know, like if you had £1 million and 500,000 in cash and 500,000 on earn-out, I'm just making up figures, but my earn-out was uncapped. So rather than get the £1 million valuation that I had for the business, I ended up getting more than double the valuation because the business performed so well because I helped them transition. And don't get me wrong, some of you listen to this, many people know stories of people that got burned on earn-out, but it's always context specific. So I sold it to somebody who I knew very well and trusted, and it worked out. And in your case, you were de-risked because the price you got, bit like if people search my podcast feed, Will, recently we republished the episode from Laura Roder, who got a multi-seven-figure all cash exit, and she got more than a good chunk more than she told me she wanted to sell it for, you know, less than 12 months prior to the exit. But so one example is that earn-out can be good. In your case, it was de-risked, and my other example, Will, is I sold a small business of mine. It was only a little deal, but I had it where they were going to sell it over years, and I actually happily took a discount of about, from memory, about 15% for getting it in cash now rather than over 12 months, which I'm glad I did because it coincided with COVID, which I didn't know. So on that one, I gave them a discount, so I cheapened the deal, but actually then I got my cash and then I was protected. So yeah, it's not as simple as it always looks.
Yeah, you know what? There was actually one thing. I'm not sure whether I told you about this when we were in the process, but right at the last minute, they offered me a little bit more cash to take a tiny. You're talking 50 grand or something off the deal, but they offered me a little bit more upfront cash to take a little bit off the total sale price. I was like, no problem at all. And yeah, I completely forgot to mention that. So I basically made sure that the upfront cash was enough for me so that, let's say, no money more comes in, you know, I'm set, you know, for life now. So
love it. Congratulations. Also, final question, or actually I'm just checking myself because I think there was two questions, but one of them's jumped out of my head. Oh yeah. Well, actually, first of all, what did it feel like? So what was it like, Deal? What was it like when it closed, Will? Because I know we were frantically, because we're on different continents, messaging backwards and forwards. But what did it feel like when the deal finally closed? It's done. Big wire comes into your bank account. What was it like? Did you treat yourself? Was it anticlimactic? What was it like?
Yeah, I've got that same feeling right now that I had. You know, you've just kind of triggered it in me, but God, it was a feeling of like half excitement and happiness and elation, and half just like, thank fuck that's over. Like, thank God it's done, it's wrapped up, it's signed, it's sealed, the money's in the bank. You know, it was very overwhelming. It was one of the most overwhelming feelings of my life. And then, you know, I posted about it on my Instagram. I did a little story about it. Man, I had like hundreds of messages. It was just insane. And then also I shot a video for my YouTube channel that people can go and watch. Just search William Brown on YouTube. You can watch the video. I shot a video unedited just after I sold and just talked through it all. And so if you want to go and kind of experience, you know, just after the moment that I closed, go and watch that video on my YouTube channel. But yeah, and there was just so many comments on that. Everyone was like, well done, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. What a feeling. What an awesome feeling, man.
And so final question, other than where can people find out about you? Any advice, any final advice, Will, to somebody that's listened to this episode, they're intrigued, they want to, considering selling their business, any final words of wisdom for anybody that's debating embarking on this journey?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that I'd say is that any business can be sold at any stage, no matter what. The only difference is to who and for what price. Okay, so it might be for $5,000. It might be for $5 million, right? There is someone out there that will buy your business right now. Okay. Depending on how it's engineered, whether you're in it, whether you're not, whether it relies on you, that will, of course, dictate the price. But every business can be sold. That's what I'd say.
I love it. I love it. And if anybody wants to get in touch, Will, where can they find you? How should they reach out?
Yeah, so the best place is Instagram, and the second best place is YouTube. Those are the only two channels that I used. If anyone has any questions, just hit me on Instagram. Go to the YouTube channel, watch the videos, leave me some nice comments, please. Those are the places.
Will, you've been very gracious with your time. Thank you very much. I know you've got another meeting now, but I appreciate you sharing your story about your exit, and congratulations. Multi-7-figure cash exit, financially free. Well done.
Thanks so much, man. What a feeling.